folks, welcome to Spark. Today on Spark Igniting Minds, we are honored to welcome a visionary in the field of geotechnical engineering, Dr. C.R. Parthasarathy, with a remarkable career that began in 1993.
So when you are in the middle of the ocean, you are subjected to severe weather conditions. You just not the technical deliverables in the project, you are also responsible for safety of people that are involved in the project. At times you have to make decision whether with severe weather conditions you have to stay in the ocean or you have to come back and take shelter. So there are several challenges. If you want to really overcome the challenges, so you have to be prepared to overcome these challenges. This is all Raghavendra Swami's anugraha.
Dr. Parthasarathy holds a degree in civil engineering from Bangalore University and a PhD in geotechnical engineering from the prestigious IISc Bangalore. His expertise spans continents, having led critical offshore and onshore geotechnical investigations in over a dozen countries, including Singapore, Iraq, Nigeria, Brunei, and Vietnam. He has solved complex foundation challenges for offshore platforms and jackup rigs, and his company Sarathy Geotech and Engineering Services, established in the year 2008, is now a global name with operations in India, Indonesia, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Nigeria. Beyond technical brilliance, Dr. Parthasarathy has made profound contributions to society and heritage preservation. One of his most revered missions was in Mantralaya, where he executed pile foundation works near the sacred Vrindavan of Sri Raghavendra Swami without disturbing the Guru's meditative state, a feat of engineering performed with spiritual sensitivity. He is a life fellow of the Indian Geotechnical Society, a recipient of numerous national and international awards, and was honored with the President's Scout Award by the President of India. Today we explore not only the depths of the earth but also the depth of service, humility, and innovation that Dr. Parthasarathy embodies. Let's welcome Dr. Parthasarathy to Spark Igniting Minds.
Namaskar, Dr. Parthasarathy, sir. It's truly an honor to have you here on Spark Igniting Minds. You have tackled many geotech problems, challenges, and you are successful in establishing your own company called as Sarathy Geotech. We are excited to have you here, and our audience will be benefited if you share your experiences and insights with them. Welcome, Dr. Parthasarathy. A very warm welcome.
Thank you, Namaskar, for having me here on your show. I'll try my best to share my experiences that can help the viewers.
Coming to the first question, reflecting your early days in 1993 as a geotechnical engineer, what valuable advice would you like to give to your younger self? And how do you navigate tough projects and turn them into successful ones?
Wonderful question.
Yeah.
I go back 30 years ago. And if I want to tell to my younger self, of course, it's a lesson for all the youngsters coming up. Maybe 3-4 things.
Right.
First thing, don't you know it all. See, always have people that can help you, coach you, mentor you. So, but somebody who have very rich experience in the field, to learn from experience. Geotechnical engineering is a very small field among the civil engineering domain. Although geotechnical itself is very vast, many times you need to collaborate with people from the other domains for the project to be successful, for your solutions to be successful. To be a structural engineer, water source engineer, you may have to interact with geologists. Sometimes you have to interact with naval architects and so on and so forth. So there's always a collaborative approach will help you solve problems. The second thing I wanted to share with people, so as you progress, you have a lot of experience in your basket, in your kit, right? So please journal them. So if you don't put it in document, then all left with you, but it's not accessible to anybody. Even now, we advocate in our own projects that every engineer who is involved in any project has to develop a project register. So there may be some decisions that you are making on a project. There may be some judgments you are making on a project. There are some lessons that you get from that project. It has to be documented. So once it is documented, it's available to you. It's also available to the next generation. So please journal that experience. The third point I would want to say to my younger self, you have the conviction to make decisions. I've seen in my own experience, people come to any expert seeking a binary answers. Okay? But at times what we do is we try to place facts on the table and say this, but ultimately we're not able to make decisions. So now they will be able to make decisions. If they were to make decisions, they wouldn't come to you. Right? So have the conviction to make some decisions with some calculated risk. So that will help to solve the problem, and the decisions you make on some projects could be a legendary milestone over the period of time. And I can quote several of them from my own experience.
Right. So if you can quote an experience where decision making was because of your decision something incredible happened. So can you?
I will quote one such example.
Right.
So there was a project which had serious foundation issue. They were not able to progress, and the project had stopped for several months.
Okay.
Lot of experts have come, have investigated, they have provided solutions, but apparently not to the extent the management was convinced, the owners was convinced. So through some of my more friends and acquaintances who are the structural engineers, so which came to us and say, "This is a problem, can look at this and provide solution." So I had the opportunity to go to the site, look at the situations, review the document, and then arrive at some solution. So two things came out of that process. One, the root cause of that led to there was no skilled resource on the project. We're testing on some of the foundations were actually manipulated. So I will be direct, but maybe I don't call it a manipulation with intention. So because they use technology, they are not aware of how to use the technology. Okay, I put it that way. But apparently it was not usable for them. I had a one-on-one with the chairman of that company and then put all the facts on the table and said, this is the solution that I feel is appropriate. To make that convincing with conviction, you need to also have courage.
Correct.
Okay, such a important.
It's not an easy task to
Not an easy task.
Right.
But despite having decades of experience, I reach out to my mentors whether what I am giving the solution is the right way or not. With concurrence, I said yes, this is technically right. So we made some decisions, and apparently the project progressed. It was during COVID time. Within a period of 8 months, 70-story building was standing high.
Oh.
And a couple of years later,
Yeah.
the structural engineer who introduced me to the project had to send a photograph where it was inaugurated by the Chief Minister of the state.
Oh.
They said, sir, we have solved the problem, we should feel proud
Right.
of ourselves. This is such a small aspect of the project, but still, that's one decision to go ahead. Completed the project. So I feel very happy about it. And also I thank all the people who are involved. It's not my own effort. Of course, the decision I was front-ending to the customer, but there was a lot of back-end work done by several of my engineers, the consultants who have supported me, fast. So you need to really.
So that's a very, very good advice that you are giving to the youngsters or your youngsters, self-like journaling, decision making. These are the very, very, I can say, significant points that they should take on and carry with their work. So having tackled offshore platforms across the globe, what has been the most complex geotechnical challenge and how did you overcome it? And if you want to explain like a sci-fi fiction, how do you explain it to me?
I recall many projects that I was involved in the midst of this sea. Where you realize the life itself is stranger than the fiction.
Fiction, yeah.
In many ways, not just related to science, it's beyond that. See, at times you have to make decisions on a project, particularly when you're representing the owners. I used to work as a client representative.
Okay.
It's just not the technical deliverables in the project. You are also responsible for safety of people that are involved in the project. So when you are in the middle of the ocean, you are subjected to severe weather conditions.
How many people will be working?
So in a small survey vessel, you will say it will be around 40 people will be there.
Okay.
So you are very responsible for the safety of all the 40 people. At times you have to make decision whether in severe weather conditions you have to stay in the ocean or you have to come back and take shelter.
Okay.
So that becomes a real challenge. When you come back and take shelter, there's a cost involved because the vessel has to travel back, say 8 hours, 9 hours. It has to shelter and then go back. So there will be some time delay, 2 days. If you forego that and intend to stay on the site, you are subjected to very harsh
Weather.
harsh weather. Whether you'll survive or not is a question.
Right.
So it again reminds me of an example in Philippines. Some years before, which I heard, I was not a part of that. Every time they predicted typhoon, they took shelter for 2 or 3 seasons. But the 4th season, they decided to stay. They said that 3 years we didn't have anything, then I will not go. But that time, the typhoon hit and the entire 300 people sacrificed their lives.
That was a bad decision.
You have to make that decision. So is it a science? Is it a fiction? I don't know. It's, now I'm getting goosebumps now at particular time because it's not about you alone.
Yeah. It's about 40 other lives.
Other people.
Yes. But how many hours they be in the sea and how deep they are in the sea when they are working?
Those campaigns, it depends on the scope of work. Sometimes you will have a short campaign that can span up to a week. Sometimes it will be a long campaign. So in one mobilization, you will do survey of several locations and then demobilize, which can go up to maybe around 6 weeks. So usually it depends on the endurance of the vessel that you have because you need to have replenishment of your food, your daily needs, your diesel, petrol and other things. If you don't have option to bring it to some other boat, then the same vessel has to come to the port and then you replenish and they go back. So generally the endurance would be around 6 weeks time at a time for these surveys, and it will be much longer as well.
That's really challenging for both the workers as well as you. Like you have worked with soils from Bangalore to Pune. What's the most unexpected soil behavior that you have encountered and that even has surprised scientists again?
Again, I recall in my younger days when I just started my career as a geotechnical engineer. Bangalore is a Deccan plateau. There you have a residual deposit. Generally, it is said you have the least complication of the soils. It has no problem for construction.
Bangalore, no problem.
No problems. It's a myth, but despite being a residual deposit, you have massive rocks, competent ground. You face several challenges.
Right.
One such I would like to highlight now. A project that was happening in Magarat Road, it's close to Brigade Road.
Right.
They planned to have a double basement for car parks, then to excavate below the ground. As a young site engineer who was foreseeing the technical investigation, he encountered rock at one corner of the lot,
Mm.
less than 4 meters.
Okay.
Although the excavation for basement,
Mm.
they plan to go up to 8 meters.
Mhm.
But surprisingly,
Mm.
on the opposite corner, you don't have rock up to 20 meters.
Okay.
So this puzzled everybody,
Right,
what is the
right.
way forward?
Huh.
If there's a rock, you wouldn't.
And rock must be very big. Like,
It's a very massive
Very
rock
massive
on one
rock,
corner,
huh.
but the other corner, the rock is absent. So there's a sloping seabed.
oh.
That posed a lot of challenges. Then I was very young as a site engineer, so I was very curious.
Mm.
So what is the way forward? I had to discuss with some seniors, the project managers there. But over the period, I learned that you have to live with these kind of uncertainties and you have to come out of the challenges. You said Brunei. Again, I recall somewhere in 2005, I had an opportunity to work on an oil and gas platform
Mm.
where one of the conductor pipes is a guide for the oil wells actually had split
Mm.
during drilling
Mhm.
because of the complex fluvial deposits. So we say it is a channel. Fluvial.
Huh.
So fluvial deposit means there used to be a river flowing thousands of years before.
Yeah.
Today there is a recent young formation and those material
Mm.
could be
Gets deposited.
deposited. It's potentially variable. You cannot predict.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in such scenario, the
Mm.
behavior of foundations is too complicated, and you
Right.
see there is a failure of these pipes,
Mm.
and you have to
And that
rector
gets synced into the.
it actually sank. No, the live wells where you are
Mm.
pumping
Mm.
the resources, actually that conductor pipes it sank for about 9 inches. So it's detrimental to the safety of the entire oil and gas platform. So in the midst of all this, you have to go and test what is the capacity and how do you augment it.
Mm.
You will have to drive it bit deeper from the limited facility that you have.
Okay.
So it's too complicated.
Mm.
Probably that 30 days of offshore that I spent is still a valuable lesson that I learned today. The resilience part of it.
One more part I'm very curious. Like when you were working in Bangalore, you saw a big rock. And how did you even solve that problem? Did you break the rock or did you remove the rock?
Now there are many ways that you can
Ah.
solve. But 30 years back,
You were very young.
but I was
Yes.
curious to know what was
Ah.
the solution.
Huh.
The architects planned a different architectural plans.
Mm.
They put a ramp where the rock was available at shallow depth, so you don't need to really break it.
Right.
So where there was no rock,
No
then
rock.
the ramps went in that side, and that's how they solved the problem. Today, probably you may have to resort to controlled blasting
Mm.
because these days within the city,
Mm.
if you were to
Mm.
excavate rock, it's going to be detrimental for safety of the adjacent structures.
Right.
So the vibrations that is
Mm.
transferred from these. So there are many limitations now,
Mm.
but although there are technologies that you can do,
Mm.
controlled blasting, you can do diamond blow cutting,
Mm.
you excavate the rocks and you can mitigate the problems.
As a Presidential Scout awardee, leadership and resilience maybe in your DNA, is in your DNA, I can say. How can you share a scouting skill or experience that proved invaluable in tackling your challenging geotechnical project?
First thing, what I learned in Scout movement
Mm.
is the motto itself.
Mm.
The Scouts motto says, be prepared, always.
Mm.
So there are several challenges.
Mm.
If you want to really overcome the challenges, so you have to be prepared to overcome these challenges. So first, second, as you said, the resilience wise.
Mm.
I'm a hardcore, pure vegetarian.
Mm.
Going around the world on many projects
Mm.
is one of the difficult
Mm.
situations that I have encountered,
Mm.
which you don't have food to eat.
Okay.
So in Scout, I recall,
Mm.
when I was in maybe class 9,
Mm.
we were supposed to earn
Mm.
a proficiency badge, so where you can stitch as part of
Your uniform.
uniform. Cooking was one of them.
Ah.
We were given one matchstick
Mm.
and you have to cook 4 dishes: rice, one rasam, one sweet, and one vegetable.
Yeah.
I'm using fire. Okay, so that culinary skills which we developed, it really helped me. So when you travel to Vietnam, Indonesia, really you don't really get that vegetarian food then 25 years back, but now I think things have changed. People have been more health conscious and you can get a lot of food these days. But then, so I used to go in the kitchen to do my cooking.
Okay, do
I
your
survived.
own cooking,
I don't
right?
cook. I said I couldn't
Yeah.
find out what material they have. Based on the materials, then you bring your own innovation
Right.
and then cook yourself. What
Okay.
all that I used to ask them is to just give me some
Uh,
time for the cooking, because they have their own commitment to cook food for the rest of the folks.
Yeah.
So in between, whenever there was less time, so I go and cook my own food.
Okay, that's wonderful, sir. So your scout has helped you to become a good cook also. That is wonderful. And founding Sarthi Geotech in 2008 was undoubtedly a significant milestone in your career. And what was a profound lesson you have learned about the industry? During your entrepreneurial journey, what were the challenges that you faced during the Sarthi Geotech?
I started this in 2007, operationally from 1st January 2008. During the initial stages, consciously we wanted to have people from Tier 2 and Tier 3 colleges, not from the very premier institutes. Despite all the deficits, these people have exceptionally performed their roles, and I have seen them grown to heights. Some of them still with us, some of them they have moved out, but they have been in a very good position. They are doing very well, and it's always a joy to see those journey from those people. The resilience of human body and mind, always there. COVID hit, with no exceptions, we were too affected.
Yes.
There were times where people have shown resilience to continue working on the projects beyond their rotation time. So usually in offshore, we rotate people for every 8 weeks maximum. But during COVID time, we were forced to have people working for a longer period of time. Longer, I mean, several months, because you're not able to send anybody because there were travel restrictions, there were quarantine issues. But the folks have really come out and they have shown resilience. They have
worked even during the COVID.
worked during the COVID. Also, 80% of people, we were locked down. We were in the comfort of our home. There were some 3-4 projects. 20% of people were on the project side. One in Bangalore, the metro projects, it was an essential service. So we had people to go and work on metro projects. They work on marine project, Kadalur, I believe. The folks could not travel. They continued to work. We had project in Saudi for the offshore project. And despite the COVID, the company said it's not a force majeure. You have to work. So the resilience of our people, they continue to work for several months and successfully completed the project over the period of time. The pandemic hit everybody. For me, also no exception. I was too a recipient of the disease or the pandemic. I was helplessly in the bed during COVID time. That gave me time to reflect the purpose of life, which ultimately has been my philosophy of organization that I have developed. And now, our philosophy is always to help people. That's a mission that we are in. So it's almost dead during COVID period. So we came out of that. So then I said the rest of the life that I live in is a bonus for me. So let me do whatever it takes to help people. So it's no more you, it's about people. And that's what the industry needs, the humanity needs, and we are all there.
It's really incredible, sir, to see that your workers were working even during the COVID period with resilience and they completed the project. And you too learned a lot of lessons saying that now it is only the contribution, the time for contribution. And that is an amazing lesson that you have learned. You said that weather was very bad, especially in offshore. There are weather challenges, and it is a formidable challenge during offshore installations. You have been telling this. What's the most extreme weather condition you have had to navigate? And how did you adapt your strategy to ensure project success?
So I already said in the earlier question that you have to make decisions when you are on the ocean of extreme weather conditions. So generally in offshore, we get the weather reports which would predict the severity ahead of time. If there is a cyclone coming, maybe a week later, you already know 7 days weather report will tell you that the seas will be very rough, your waves will be very high, your wind will
And those predictions come true, sir.
It gives you very good indicators because nowadays there are a lot of technology and data that gives you almost reasonable prediction. So you tend to watch those weather reports and make informed decisions whether you stay in the ocean or you come back and take shelter. So I have seen in some instances we did not get a weather report in time.
Okay.
So the vessel was stuck in a cyclone. The cyclone, I would say, the wind speed is lot of about 50 nautical miles and the waves is around 6 to 8 meters. It's nightmare to spend the night or even spend few hours in the ocean for that kind of weather. So it was in Bay of Bengal. I was stuck in cyclone for 4 nights.
Oh.
That was the severity of the weather, the extreme weather that I have seen. Know where to go, which direction to go, because we don't know where the cyclone is going. All the small vessels that was operating, they went and to take shelter, but this vessel did not have the weather report, they don't know which direction to go. So these 4 nights I was stuck in cyclone. That was one of the worst weather conditions that I have experienced, and I wish that nobody should experience that. So why did we experience that? Because we didn't have the weather report supplied. Because you need to subscribe for that weather report. It comes with a cost. Most of the oil and gas companies, the contractors subscribe, but apparently this was the state-owned.
They did not
Well,
subscribe.
Did
for
not
the
subscribe.
weather
They relied on some
Yeah.
meteorological department where the
Right.
information was too late. That could have costed the life. So that
The
was,
uncertainty in your work is really,
so
we don't know what happens when.
that was the
Yeah.
first rebirth, I would say, and COVID the second one. So
What is the second? Very challenging. So, from the architectural marvels of Singapore to the ambitious developments in Saudi Arabia, what construction project has truly amazed you?
When I was in Singapore, again I recall one of the important failure, Nicola Highway collapse. So the project had a plan to excavate below the ground of 30 meters.
Right.
This was the first time that the island was planning, although they had several projects where they had deep excavation for basement, multiple car parks of about 15-18 meters was not account. So 30 meters was the first. So we see there's a collapse of the excavation, failure of one of the support system that really costed some life. Later on, I go through the investigation report that is available in public domain. There's a 1,000-page report. They have given the causative factors, what are the technical deficiency, and so on and so forth. So that would be one of the projects that I wish now, if I were to be there, with this experience and knowledge and the technology and information available, you would have saved that project.
And coming to your Mantralia project, I have heard so much about it that you have, the 1,000 files without disturbing the vegetative posture of Aswendra Swami. You have done it. So, how did you do that, sir? And what was your experience there?
The office in Mantralayam, the civil engineering team is there. They always used to call us to do some investigation for any new construction. So likewise, for the expansion of the center temple premises, they called us. But we couldn't do the investigation very close to where the Swamiji's town is there. But our team said that, okay, we'll do outside. Just massive rock. But then when the actual construction happened to expand, we need to put some kind of foundation. Okay, the structural engineer, the design, let us put some micropiles. And then we put the foundation on top of micropiles and expand the temple premises. During construction time, the drilling that was happening created a lot of vibration. Swamiji was in the mud, in the temple premises, and he could see a lot of vibration. He came out and saw the construction workers doing drilling for micropiles. Immediately he said, no, we should stop this vibration. We cannot accommodate. And then very risky. I'm very
Is disturbed actually.
is disturbed, and I'm not confident that it would not endanger Vrindavan itself. So he said, no, I want to speak to the geotechnical consultant. So then they called me over the night. They said the Swami has to meet you. I took a cab when such a big pontiff is calling me. In fact, I had a plan to travel overseas. He said, well, this is the priority. We took a cab there and then we went there morning. I had a darshan. Then we went to the site. Then I see there's a lot of boulders being packed around the temple. The boulders not disturbing, the drilling is disturbing the boulders, creating huge vibration. I realized the importance of the temple premises after discussion with
The pot.
Pontiff Swami. He explained me that Vrindavan has no reinforcement. They have just placed brick over the brick, so it's very, very sensitive. At that point, when he was explaining, I said, no, this micro piles cannot be installed here. This machine has to be replaced. Then we thought of alternate ways of solving the problem. The other way of solving the problem is to install a well. For our house, water wells, people used to dig and put the rakes over maybe some 10 feet, 12 feet, 15 feet. Likewise, we asked to install some wells. So you just excavate, put a ring, you excavate further, slide another ring so it's protected, and fill those wells with some plumb concrete, and then put your foundation on top of it. So we have to mobilize the blue collar staff from Bangalore. So we used to do a lot of excavation and earthwork, and they actually did all these wells, completed the project. During the course, there's a mutt in Jayanagar, Bangalore. Swami had, in fifth block,
Yes.
he had come there for one of the aradhanas. Then we went and requested, please, we want your blessings in our office. And he came to the office. And it was such a pleasure for us and an honor to see that big pontiff coming to our office and blessing us. So we all had the blessing of Swamiji in our office.
And you dug 1,000 wells. to
Not
put-
1,000 wells, it was few wells around.
Few wells around, and thereafter you had.
So this project now on the completion and for the inauguration, they were planning to call our Prime Minister Modi ji. But apparently, I think that plan was deferred because whatever the reasons are there. So later on, Swamiji went to Delhi to explain and handed over about the Mantralaya to Modi. I see that photo also with me.
Oh, that's wonderful, sir. And really, this challenge you have really come out with both the blessings and your skill and effort that you have.
This is all Ravindra Swami's anugraha for you.
Yeah. If you were to leave a lasting geotechnical lesson for future generations, a message encapsulated in a symbolic time capsule, what advice would you offer and where would you find it?
For the future generation, 2-3 very important points. Okay. So learn from experience, go to basics and fundamentals. Number 3, you approach problem every time as it is your first time. Then of course this, I wish that I bury in massive rock of Bangalore. Is very safest place. We are also blessed to be in Bangalore, which we do not have natural calamities. There is no distress.
Safest place
Safest
on
place
earth.
for earthquakes, nor you have floods,
Yeah.
nor you have
No natural disasters.
Natural disasters. But still, man-made disasters are several. So we civil engineers, our profession should be very mindful of what we are doing and address the requirements of Mother Earth. Traditionally, we call Earth as our mother, right? Always enduring all the atrocities we do to her. So she speaks to profession, to geotechnical engineers. She reveals herself despite the challenges and complications in the stratigraphy, telling one thing, that please address this with all humility and curiosity.
Oh. That is what Mother Earth is.
Very mindful of the future generations and also provide solutions with sustainability in mind. So we humans now are always following the anthropocentric approach. So we humans are much higher than the others, but you will always resort, I feel, to the ecocentric approach where you need to have common living, inclusive living with all the
Nature.
with the nature.
With the
Because
nature. We are a part of the nature. We are
of
not separated
That's
from
right.
the nature. Actually. Sir, always the resilience and curiosity have led to breakthroughs, as you have already told. If you could invite 3 legendary engineers from history to a dinner discussion, who would they be? And also, what complex geotechnical problem would you present to them? And how do you think the debate would unfold?
If I can think so, I would think about Carl Terzaghi, who is this father of soil mechanics. Carl Terzaghi.
All the
So he founded soil mechanics. We call him father of soil mechanics, who
Right.
actually brought out all the mechanics of the soil behavior. The second will be our Sir M.V.
No.
Sir M. Vishweshwaraya. He's the great architect, great engineer that we have had for several centuries now. The third, I would think of our past president Abdul Kalam. If I were to put a question to them, how do we build infrastructure in space?
Okay.
I'm imagining the basic fundamentals coming from the father of soil mechanics,
Yeah.
the design and architecture coming from Sir M.V. and how to send this infrastructure to
Space.
men and material to space from Abdul Kalam. And I am very sure that
At least on the earth you have something solid, and how do you really?
I'm
Yes.
very sure that there will not be one upmanship in
Hmm.
this team of these people discussing on this. So maybe I go with
That is a very, very creative idea of yours to build something in the space. So coming to geotechnical engineering may not always get the spotlight. Because many of us don't know, there are a lot of misconceptions also about technical engineering. But if we were to be the focus of a cinematic blockbuster, how would you pitch as a protagonist? What would be the tagline of your engineering adventure?
this reminds me of one of the recent movie, Deepwater Horizon.
Okay.
This about an oil rig which had some accidents, tragedy, loss of life, with management initially look at improving the profits at the cost of safety, and finally when there was an accident, there was oil spillage, environmental issue, and so on and so forth. I have not watched the movie, to be honest, but I would rather give one orthogonal example back home. Our legendary cinema star in Karnataka, Dr. Rajkumar, one of his movies, Bangar Manushya. In that there is a trick, but not a geotechnical trick, which I have always adopted successfully. So in the movie, a piece of land, once it was a barren land, came to life just because of one man's conviction of ability and hard work. Trick always works, and so it will work in geotechnical too.
Being the protagonist, I mean, you want to be a hero like Rajkumar.
No, his conviction, if you really watch that movie, it gives a very valuable
What
lesson.
was his conviction?
And it's he wanted to bring that agricultural land in the midst of the industrialization development. He said that this barren land being brought to life. So beautiful movie which has actually inspired generations of people. It was in the early 70s. It's time that we go and watch again. So maybe I've forgotten those movies again. Now I'll go and watch again.
So what would be the tagline of your
I would say with all the knowledge, experience, skill, technology available to us, it could be Geotech Diviner. Geotech Diviner. So you just find a location, then immediately you should get all the stratigraphy, strength parameters, behaviors, lateral variability, everything together. So we have the machine learning, artificial intelligence. We have huge database available for the last several decades now. So we are able to put all those information together and you pick a coordinate, then you'll be able to tell us what is the stratigraphy like, what is the risk that the stratigraphy poses to the construction, either it's land or ocean, doesn't matter. So it takes as a geotech diviner. You know, the water diviners won't locate where the water is available. Likewise, the geotech diviner should
We'll give you all
get all the parameters necessary for you to make a decision.
Yeah.
In fact, I want to share, I am also coming up with one of my book launch, perhaps this month. The basic premise of bringing this book is to share my experience working in offshore field in different geographies from Southeast Asia to India to Middle East. Because the stratigraphy is ultimately different in one location to the other locations. And these stratigraphy poses unique challenges in the respective geographies. So how we overcome those challenges for the construction is what I want to bring it, and that will be very valuable information, I believe, for the next generation professionals.
All the best for your book, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your insights and experiences. Your life has been very challenging, you can say. And I think the audience have taken a lot of lessons from you about resilience, about leadership, about decision making and all that. That's amazing, sir. Thank you so much.
So first of all, I need to thank you for inviting me for this interview. And I hope there's some piece of lessons that I have shared to the audience. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.